It was 3 o'clock in the morning, but outside Alan's window, the sun was still shining. It wasn't a blinding light. It was a strange, heavy amber glow, like a sunset that had forgotten how to die. Alan stared at his watch. 3 a.m. He tapped the glass. The digital numbers blinked back at him. He opened his front door. The street was dead silent. Usually at this hour, you could hear the distant hum of the highway, the rustle of wind through the trees, the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog. But tonight, there was nothing. No wind. No birds. No cars. Just a heavy, suffocating stillness. Across the street, his neighbor, an elderly stickman named Thomas, was standing on his lawn. He was barefoot. He was just staring up at the sky. Alan walked over. "Thomas, are you seeing this?" Thomas didn't look at him. He just pointed up. The clouds weren't moving. They were frozen in place, like a painting on a canvas. "It stopped," Thomas whispered. His voice was trembling. "It's not moving anymore." At first, nobody understood. The internet was flooded with memes. People joked about the longest day in history. Bosses demanded employees show up to work anyway. School buses ran under the eternal, unmoving sun. But the jokes didn't last. By midday of what should have been the second day, the first shift happened. It started with a feeling in the stomach, a light, dizzying sensation, like the split second an elevator drops. Alan was standing in his kitchen when he felt it. Suddenly, his cup of coffee didn't sit straight. The liquid tilted. It was leaning toward the north. He pushed the cup. It slid across the counter on its own, dripping over the edge. Then the emergency sirens began to wail. It was a sound Alan had never heard before. Not the high-pitched police sirens, but the deep, chest-rattling howl of the Global Defense Network. The television screen flickered to life. The news anchor wasn't reading from a script. He wasn't even looking at the camera. He was sweating, staring at a tablet off-screen. "This is not a drill," the anchor said. His voice was cracked. "The Earth's rotation is decelerating. We are slowing down." The anchor explained the nightmare. The Earth spins at over 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. It is this spin that creates the centrifugal force holding the oceans in place. Without that spin, gravity would take full control. The water would no longer want to stay at the equator. It would begin to migrate toward the poles. "If you live in the red zones," the anchor gasped, a map flashing on the screen, "you must evacuate immediately. The oceans are moving." Alan looked at the map. His city was right on the edge of the blue line. But water wasn't the only thing moving. The atmosphere was also tied to the Earth's spin. And while the solid ground was slowing down, the air was not. The air kept moving at 1,000 miles per hour. Alan heard it before he saw it. A low, guttural roar from the horizon. It sounded like 1,000 jet engines starting up at once. He ran to the window. In the distance, trees were not bending. They were exploding. The massive oak tree in Thomas's yard was snapped in half like a toothpick, its branches flying into the sky. The wind hit the house. The glass shattered instantly. Alan was thrown backward, hitting the wall hard. The air was ripped from his lungs. It was a hurricane unlike anything humanity had ever witnessed. It wasn't rain. It was just raw, violent velocity. He crawled on his hands and knees, shielding his eyes from flying debris. Outside, cars were being tossed through the air like toys. Houses were being peeled open, their roofs flying away into the amber sky. Alan managed to drag himself down into the basement. He huddled in the darkest corner, hugging his knees, listening to the world above him being torn to shreds. The screaming of the wind went on for hours, or maybe days. Time had lost all meaning. There was no night to mark the passage of hours, just the eternal mocking sun. When the wind finally died down to a low, hollow whistle, Alan crawled out of the ruins. His neighborhood was gone. It was just flat gray dirt. A few concrete foundations stood like tombstones. Thomas was nowhere to be found. Only his broken glasses lay in the dust. But the silence that followed was even worse than the wind. The air felt thin, cold. Alan gasped for breath. It felt like he was standing on top of Mount Everest. With the Earth slowing down, the atmosphere was also migrating toward the poles. The equator was losing its air. Every breath Alan took felt like swallowing glass. He knew he had to move. If he stayed here, he would suffocate. He packed a single backpack with whatever bottled water he could find in the rubble. He began to walk north. The landscape was unrecognizable. Thousands of stickmen were on the road. They walked like ghosts, silent, exhausted. Nobody talked. They didn't have the breath to spare. Some collapsed by the roadside. No one stopped to help them. There was no help to give. As Alan walked, he noticed the sun. For the past 3 days, it had stayed in the exact same spot in the sky. But now, as he walked further north, the sun began to sink. Slowly, painfully. It was moving toward the horizon. To his left, the western sky was turning a deep, bruised purple. To his right, the east was still a blinding, burning white. The world was splitting in two. One half of the earth was destined to become a frozen, eternal wasteland of darkness. The other half would become a scorched, boiling desert under a sun that never set. Only a thin strip of land between the hot and cold zones would remain habitable. The twilight zone. A narrow band of permanent dusk. That was where everyone was marching. A strip of land just a few miles wide, wrapping around the globe. Alan's boots clicked on the cracked asphalt. The temperature was dropping fast. The hot, humid air of his home was gone. Now a biting, icy chill crept through his thin jacket. He looked back. Behind him, the sun was still blazing. It looked angry. Huge. The ground back there was baking. The rivers were drying up, turning into cracked clay. He looked ahead. Before him lay the dark. A massive, towering wall of shadow stretched across the horizon. It looked like a solid black mountain. Inside that shadow, there was no light. No warmth. Only ice. The crowd of stickmen reached the edge of the shadow. Some hesitated. They stood at the border of light and dark, terrified of both. Alan stepped forward. His left foot was in the bright golden light. His right foot was in the cold blue shadow. He looked down at his own shadow. It was stretched out, incredibly long, reaching deep into the dark. He took another step. The warmth of the sun vanished from his back. The cold hit him like a physical blow. He shivered violently. He looked up. The stars were visible now, but they didn't twinkle. They were cold, sharp points of light in a pitch-black sky. This was the new world. A world without mornings. A world without evenings. A world where you lived in the shadow or burned in the light. Alan found a small cluster of makeshift tents near the border. People had built small fires using the debris they had carried with them. He sat down near one of the fires. An old woman offered him a cup of dirty water. He took it, his hands shaking so hard the water spilled. "Do you think it will ever start again?" she asked. Her eyes reflected the orange flames. Alan looked at the fire. Then he looked up at the sky, at the stars that refused to move, at the moon frozen like a broken coin in the dark. "No," Alan said softly. "I don't think it will." He pulled his knees to his chest. He remembered the sound of the wind in the trees. He remembered the simple beauty of a sunset, how he used to complain about Mondays, how he used to wish for longer days. We had a miracle, Alan thought. A giant, beautiful sphere spinning perfectly in the void, giving us day, giving us night, keeping us warm, keeping us alive. And we never even noticed. Until it stopped. Alan closed his eyes. In the eternal twilight, he fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, hoping that when he woke up, the sun would finally be on the other side of the sky. But deep down, he knew. The morning was never coming back.